working on a new book called The Lost Scrolls of Enoch. And I'm going to go through this material. This is going to be a series. It's going to be about the book of Enoch. There's a lot of interest about, curiosity in the book of Enoch, one of the lost books of the Bible that has survived. I guess it wasn't really accessible to the Western European Christian world until probably the 17 or 1800s when it was discovered in Ethiopia. Of course, they never lost it in Ethiopia, but it was lost to the rest of the world. It was suppressed. So a few years ago, I gave a lecture on the book of Enoch. Someone posted an irate comment attacking me for promoting a false writing. I corrected him to say that I wasn't advocating for the factual veracity of the book of Enoch. What I was doing is exploring an important piece of ancient literature. No one disputes the book of Enoch was written centuries before Jesus. To the Greeks, the Iliad and the Odyssey held a status similar to that of Scripture. People can dispassionately study and enjoy the merits of the works of Homer without believing these works are factual. Right? I mean, take a piece of literature. It's culturally and historically significant, right? The Odyssey and the Iliad, people study it to this very day. If you read Plato, it's kind of interesting. Plato hated the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I can see why. There's a lot of things in Plato I disagree with, but Plato would look at the behavior of the Greek gods, and he just think, what is God like? Wouldn't God be sublime and transcendent and good? Would God engage in these petty squabbles that we find in the works of Homer? So he'd ridicule it. But like I said, there's things in Plato I think are profound. But then there's a lot of things in Plato's writings that are very disturbing, sickening even. He presents really perverted things as great concepts to be aspired to. But in passing, it's kind of interesting. You take the works of Homer, the Odyssey, well, the Iliad first and the Odyssey, and it turns out that there was indeed a Trojan War, right? So the books are legendary, but they're not totally mythological. It's based on something that actually happened. So some of these people, like Achilles and Hector and Priam and others, might have been actual people that lived, and some of the events might actually have been based on things that really happened. I remember I was watching this documentary about this scholar who read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and he's like, he believed that this really happened, so he excavated the area and found Troy. It actually has bearing on the Bible. Probably what happened when we deal with the Philistines, these were tribes of people who were related to the Greeks. And what happened, the Trojan War broke out. You had this basically, refugee crisis like we see going on today. And one of these migrant communities were the so-called Sea Peoples, which included the Philistines. Of course, so if these people were migrants fleeing the Civil War, then the Trojan War, if these were migrants fleeing the Trojan War, then the story of the Trojan War actually impacted the Bible story, right? So you had the Trojan War breaking out, and various tribes of people from Greece and Crete and Cyprus, they had to flee the effects of the war and made their way into Canaan and played an instrumental role in the story of Judges and the books of Samuel. So let's continue and look at Enoch, and we have our little buddy here. This is Bingo the cat. So some people get really upset just because you're talking about the book of Enoch. And it's like we need to be able to look at it like a work of literature. Take, for instance, people don't go apoplectic when someone studies the book of Tobit or the books of Maccabees as they do in reacting to the studying or discussing of the book of Enoch. Now, there are certain issues that people do have with the book of Enoch, and I'm going to touch on them in the course of this study. The fact of the matter is the book of Enoch is significant. The book of Enoch is quoted from in the New Testament. So why do certain people become enraged when a scholar is interested in culturally significant, theologically influential literature? Influential literature that is referenced to, alluded to, quoted from by the apostles and the early church fathers. The book of Enoch is pivotal to any attempt to understand the cultural context of the New Testament and of early Christianity. This is a fact, regardless of how people are offended or enraged by the book of Enoch, as some are. To understand fully the people of Bible times, one must be familiar with the book of Enoch. Every serious Bible scholar is. So, if you're studying the Jewish culture in the time of Jesus, and the Roman world and culture at that time, the Greco-Roman world, and the Dead Sea Scrolls and things like that, to understand the cultural context of the revelation of Jesus Christ and the gospel, then every serious scholar is familiar with the book of Enoch. I mean, why would you limit your understanding of the cultural context by ignoring an impactful and important work of literature that was influential in that era? So, I understand certain people's concern with the book of Enoch, and I think some of it's valid. However, regardless of that, it's important for us to be familiar with the book of Enoch, and in order to have a full understanding of the Jewish culture in the time of Jesus and the worldview of certain cultures at the time of Christ. And I'll address the concerns that people have, of course, in the study. So, what is the book of Enoch? Actually, there are 3 books of Enoch. Actually, there's more than that, as I'll discuss in a minute. First Enoch is Ethiopian, or Ethiopic Enoch. It's written in a language called, or it's translated into a language called Ge'ez. Apparently, the book of Enoch was written in Aramaic, and it's translated into Greek. What happened is the church fathers suppressed the book of Enoch, so we don't have a full manuscript in Greek or Latin, even though we know that they existed. The full manuscript is preserved in the Ethiopian language called Ge'ez. And there's different languages spoken in Ethiopia today, like Tigrayan and Amharic. Amharic is kind of like the national language. But they use just like the Catholic Church uses Latin, and just say in Europe, Latin's used, and you have languages descended from Latin, like Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian, like French, languages like that. But the people are speaking different languages. Ge'ez is an older form of the Ethiopian languages, and that's the form of language they use for liturgical purposes. And their church services, like the Catholic Church, use Latin. I'm going to discuss Second and Third Enoch as well briefly. Second Enoch is written in Slavonic. This is Old Church Slavonic. This liturgical church used in the Russian Orthodox, and I think the Bulgarian Orthodox Church as well. Third Enoch is in Hebrew. I'll discuss these books in due course. The most ancient version of the book of Enoch, or one of these 3 books, the most ancient is of course First Enoch, which I don't know if scholars agree on the exact date in which it was composed, but we're looking at hundreds of years before the time of Jesus. And then we have Second Enoch, which is preserved in Slavonic, but recently a translation of Second Enoch was found in Egypt in the Coptic language. And scholars do believe that Second Enoch is from the time of Jesus. It's very interesting. It's probably created by a community of people who venerated Enoch and preserving traditions associated with Enoch. Third Enoch is in Hebrew. It's kind of very different from First and Second Enoch. It's about Jewish meditative techniques, I guess, or Jewish meditation is kind of a complicated field, and Third Enoch is related to that. When people discuss Enoch, they usually mean First Enoch or Ethiopic Enoch. First Enoch is quoted directly from, and it's quoted in the Epistle of Jude in the New Testament. First Enoch is the most ancient and important of these books of Enoch that we'll begin our study with that one. So when people talk about the book of Enoch, they're talking about Ethiopic Enoch or First Enoch. And actually it was originally Aramaic Enoch. And when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, they found several copies of the book of Enoch in Aramaic. So what's the book of Enoch about? The Bible describes Enoch as the 7th from Adam. The book of Genesis states that Enoch lived 365 years, and then he walked with God and was not, for God took him. The Epistle to Hebrews states that Enoch was, got a typo here I'm going to fix, it says transalted, but it means translated. He was translated so as not to see death. From the book of Genesis, this is the story. The book of Genesis states that prior to the flood of Noah, when human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not always contend with mankind forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim, or the giants, were on the earth in those days, and afterwards, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. These were the heroes of old, men of renown." So what does this mean? This is understood in ancient times to mean that the sons of God, they're angelic beings. So it's took to mean that fallen angels procreated with human women and bore children. Some of the church fathers accepted and used the book of Enoch, like in the epistle of Barnabas, and also Tertullian of Carthage, North African church father, wrote Latin. Other church fathers protested and argued that the angels are non-corporal, immaterial beings, and as such, it's impossible for them to breed with human beings, right? So that's an issue. I think that's how do you answer that? They argue that this is not physically or biologically possible. So then what does this verse mean? The argument proposed was the sons of God here are either godly men or men descended from Seth, the son of Adam, and not Cain. The daughters of men are taken to either mean sinful women or women descended from Cain. St. Augustine and other church fathers use this argument to repress or suppress, or both, the book of Enoch. It was suppressed so effectively that only fragments of it survive in Latin and Greek. It is preserved in its entirety in Ethiopian, the Ethiopic language, as I mentioned earlier. What happened is that Jews at the time of Jesus and early Christians used the book of Enoch as part of the Bible. Later, after it was suppressed, but Ethiopia was distant and cut off to a large degree from the rest of the Christian world. There, it was canonized as part of the Old Testament, preserved. So what happened is the book of Enoch was widely used. It's quoted from the New Testament. It's quoted from the early church fathers. Then Tertullian said, well, I use the book of Enoch. I believe in it. I understand people have a different opinion. I respect that. This is my opinion, so I'm going to quote from it. So then later, Augustine of Hippo is like, we need to get rid of the book of Enoch. And the church did. But the problem is later on, you had the Muslim conquest, or the Arab conquest, and Ethiopia was cut off from the rest of the Christian world. So the book of Enoch was suppressed very effectively, but these, how are you going to enforce the suppression of a book and all the way in the Horn of Africa? You'd have to get through the Muslims to do it. And probably the language was another factor that led to its preservation. That it was preserved in the Ge'ez language. For the longest time, Ethiopia was part of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Egypt. It broke off and became its own. They're in full fellowship with the Coptic Orthodox Church of Egypt, but the Ethiopian church broke off and several decades ago and became its own Orthodox church, in full standing with the other Orthodox churches. And then you had the Eritrean church that broke off from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So you got Eritrea, and which was, what happened was Ethiopia's coastline was colonized by the Italians. Wow. And they called that region Eritrea, and they developed their own culture. And Ethiopia wanted to, once you had decolonization, they wanted Eritrea back, but the Eritreans formed their own cultural identity, and they didn't want to be part of Ethiopia anymore. So you had this division, even though their cultures are the same, their languages and religions are the same. So since those two countries went their own way, Eritrea formed its own church, even though theologically it's the same as Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Because of war and cultural divisions, it's its own independent church. So I was reading about the history of the Coptic Church. We need to expand our knowledge of church history, and a lot of people don't understand or know much about the history of the Coptic Church in Egypt, and Coptic churches, that had been eradicated by the Muslims in Nubia, but also the churches, in Ethiopia and Eritrea. But sometimes the patriarch of Egypt, patriarch of Alexandria, their pope would send bishops to Ethiopia, but sometimes they didn't even they just spoke Arabic and they knew Coptic. They didn't know anything about it. They're like a figurehead, and they didn't really understand the culture there very well, and probably because of the ignorance and misunderstanding, it would have been possible that perhaps, I don't know, if one of these bishops had the inclination, I guess he could have suppressed it, but it never happened. If these bishops were more fluent in the Ethiopian languages, maybe Enoch would have been suppressed by them, but it was preserved. All right, let's talk about the manuscripts of the Book of Enoch. Several fragments of the Book of Enoch were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're in Aramaic, all of them. Scholars believed, based on the number of manuscripts discovered at Qumran, that the community that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls viewed the Book of Enoch as part of the Bible. You can get a copy of the Book of the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible, but I mean, it's a very important manuscript discovery. Some scrolls have survived intact, completely intact, like the Great Isaiah Scroll, but a lot of scrolls they deteriorated and they're in fragments, right? Like, for instance, there's the Job Targum in Aramaic. So they translated the Book of Job into Aramaic as a Targum, and they discovered this among the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the core of the book preserved; the rest of it rotted away. It's ravaged, it's destroyed by the ravages of time. So the same thing happened to the Book of Enoch. Several manuscripts of the Book of Enoch, but not one is the complete Book of Enoch. There may be a complete Book of Enoch, an Aramaic manuscript of the Book of Enoch, that's held by a private collector. The Aramaic Enoch Scroll is a non-published complete copy of the Book of Enoch that is rumored to be in the possession of private investors. There's no proof of its existence, but according to the former editor of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is John Strugnell, the scroll is well preserved in microfilm. I read this article. What happened was there was a monopoly on the Dead Sea Scroll. So the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in Jordanian territory, and Jordan assigned, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan assigned scholars and academics, and professors, certain Dead Sea Scrolls to translate and publish. And then Israel took over the West Bank, and they allowed the scholars to continue their work. But then later on, you had Herschel Shanks of the Biblical Archaeology Review magazine, and it's like, well, the Dead Sea Scrolls were translated, so they're discovered in like 1947, 1948. So here it was, 1989, and several Dead Sea Scrolls hadn't been published yet. So they started to raise a stink about it. It's like, when are they going to publish these scrolls? It's been over 50 years, and they're still sitting on them. And they finally, what somebody did was they made a concordance in certain of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they used that to reconstruct the texts. So that's how they broke the monopoly. So it's really, at that time anyway, Biblical Archaeological Review, Bar magazine, they were attacking Strugnell, and saying they're attacking him, and he made a comment. I don't think he was anti-Semitic. He's like, I'm a Christian. I prefer the Christian religion to the Jewish religion, and so I like the Biblical Archaeological Review. I'm not knocking it, but they used that as a way to pressure him, to attack him, so the Dead Sea Scrolls be published. But later they decided to mend fences, and Herschel Shanks and John Strugnell sat down and had a friendly interview and a conversation, which was published in Biblical Archaeological Review. So it's like, Herschel Shanks is like, I need to get the Dead Sea Scrolls published. I'm going to go after John Strugnell, and he attacked him, and then he made some comments that were used to insinuate that he's an anti-Semite, even though I don't think that was his intention. And then finally, the Dead Sea Scrolls were the monopoly was broken. The Dead Sea Scrolls were published, and Herschel Shanks decided at that time to mend fences and have a friendly interview. He was demonizing John Strugnell because he's trying to put pressure on him to get the Dead Sea Scrolls published. Once they were published, he decided to try to restore their relationship. But in the course of that conversation, Strugel mentioned that during the Gulf War, I guess this must have been like Gulf War I was 91, so this is like 92 or 3, and he said that a woman came to him, and she had hidden on her body some microfilm, which she showed him. She showed him the manuscript, a perfectly well-preserved manuscript of the Book of Enoch, in the same good condition as the great Isaiah scroll, the full Book of Enoch. And it seems like some Jordanian had a hold of it. Maybe it was bought by an investor. I remember just a couple of years ago, well, it's been more than a couple of years ago, but the Gospel of Judas Iscariot was published. Now, Judas Iscariot did not write that Gospel. It's written 150 years probably, or maybe 200 years after Judas Iscariot committed suicide. So you had these Gnostic religions. Somebody wrote a book and entitled it. It's a fictitious book, synonymously. Wrote a false gospel, entitled it The Gospel of Judas Iscariot. But even though it's not a real, genuine gospel written by Judas Iscariot, it's a very important manuscript because it is over, probably 1,800 years old, right? And it shows us what these Gnostic groups believed during this important conflict in early Christianity, where you had the Gnostics versus the Orthodox Christians. So it's a very important manuscript. And what happened, I was reading about the publication of the Gospel of Judas Iscariot, and the scholar was trying to get, the collector, right? The collector, he has a copy, just like these people that have the Book of Enoch. He has a copy of the Gospel of Judas. Now, the Book of Enoch is going to be in a scroll, right? The Gospel of Judas Iscariot is codex, which is like a little booklet, pretty much the same thing as this, right? Pages fold together. They stitched it. This is staples in it. So what had happened is he was wanting an outrageous amount of money for it, and the museums and the universities were interested in purchasing the Book of Judas Iscariot, or the Gospel of Judas Iscariot. But what happened is he wouldn't sell. He was trying to get as much money as he could. Then it started to deteriorate, right? And pressure was put on the collector and then on the institutions of higher learning. It's like the collector's like, if he doesn't sell this soon, he's not going to have the book of the Gospel of Judas Iscariot. He's going to have a pile of dust. It's deteriorating. It's a 1,700, 800-year-old document that was crumbling to pieces. And then the scholars and the academic community is like, if we don't purchase this now, this is the only copy of the Gospel of Judas Iscariot. It's going to be lost forever. Yeah. I think one of the church fathers mentioned it, so we knew that we knew this is, like I said, it's not written by Judas Iscariot. It's written over 100 years after the time of Judas Iscariot, but this is an ancient document. It's historically important in early Christian studies because of the great conflicts between the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, and the Gnostic heretical movement. So the same thing's going on, but apparently this, I have to believe it because John Strugel, he died in 2007. He's not a quack, right? This is one of the men who is an official Dead Sea Scroll scholar and translator, right? He's a respected, reputable scholar. I think he's working with Harvard, one of these other prestigious universities. So if he's saying during the Gulf War someone tried to sell him the Book of Enoch, they showed him a microfilm of it, and then they decided they want to, because if it's well preserved, it's a priceless manuscript. It's got an intrinsic value to it, right? It's an investment. So the collector is an investment of a lost book of the Bible. Potentially get millions of dollars for it, right? I mean, look at dollar bills right now. They say a lot of our currency is overseas, but because of Democrat Party policies, our money's being devalued, right? But if you have something like it's an investment, right? This is a priceless manuscript, but it needs to be published, right? This collector is holding on to it for greed of financial purposes, and he's depriving the world and the scholarly community of this important manuscript. So let's continue here. There's no proof of the existence of the Aramaic Book of Enoch, but according to the former chief editor of the Dead Sea Scrolls editorial team, That's John Strugnell. He died in 2007. I think this interview was 92, 93. I'm not sure the exact date. I had that magazine. I remember reading it. The scroll is well preserved and microfilmed. Strugnell said that he was shown the microfilm in 1990 during the Kuwait crisis, but he's never able to buy it for the editorial team. According to Strugnell, the scroll is found in Qumran Cave 11. A lot of the important manuscripts, I think Cave 4 and Cave 11 had the most manuscripts discovered there. Bingo he's so hyper. I need to throw him out. He's so hyper right now. Why are you so hyper, Bingo? What's wrong with you? Crazy cat. All right. So according to Strugnell, the scroll was found in Qumran Cave 11 in 1956, together with the other already publicized scrolls and fragments. This cave was found by the same Bedouin, Abu Dahoud, who first discovered the cave in 1947. There's also the Kando family. I remember I went to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. I've seen various displays of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Saw them here in Houston, and saw them in San Diego, and I saw the Dead Sea Scrolls at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. They go after my glasses. So while I was at Southwestern, you have a lot of Christians in. You used to have you still to this day they've declined, but Bethlehem used to be over half Christian. Now it's just 25% Christian because of immigration and the higher birth rate. That's probably changing now. The birth rate's probably the same. For the longest time, Christians had a lower birth rate and Muslims had a higher birth rate, but now Muslim birth rate's declining significantly. But I was at Waco, sorry, not Waco, it's the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Fort Worth at my seminary, and they had these large collection of Dead Sea Scrolls privately owned by the Kando family, and this is the people, the Bedouins. It's a Christian family, Syrian Orthodox Christian family in Bethlehem. They sold the earliest Dead Sea Scrolls through them. They still possess. I'm surprised that these scrolls weren't seized from them. They were loaning it to my seminary, but there are people that privately own certain Dead Sea Scrolls. So this story is probably, I think it's unfortunate it's being hidden from the public, but hopefully we'll get to find out what's. The other thing that's important is I'll mention the book of the parables, or the book of the similitudes of Enoch. Fragments of that have not been discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, but maybe they exist in this Aramaic Enoch scroll. All right. Apart from this, another scroll from Cave 11, which he came to have seen, Strugnell had heard Gerald Lancaster Harding, the director of Jordan's Department of Antiquities, speak of at least 2 never published scrolls from the same find. These are some of them were at that time, the Kuwait crisis, about to be bought by private, probably European collectors and bankers. The reason for buying them was for investments. So Strugnell had arrangements with several serious buyers who had publicized the scrolls. He was never able to convince the owners to sell. They're probably asking for too much money, just like what happened with the book of the Gospel of Judas Iscariot. So, you're a naughty cat. He's never been so naughty before. Why are you so naughty, Bingo? He's hyper cat. All right, small fragments of the book of Enoch have been preserved in Syriac, Coptic, Greek, and Latin. And there's also a section of the book of Enoch that's found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, but not preserved in the Ethiopian book of Enoch. This section is called the Book of Giants. It was discovered first at the Turfan Oasis, the Turfan Scrolls in China, in the Persian language, and then also in the Aramaic fragments of Qumran. An important manuscript discovery is made in Turfan, which included the Nestorian literature. This is the Jesus Sutras, right? They put that in there, Jesus Sutras. That's what they call these documents. What the Jesus Sutras are is Aramaic Christians, Assyrian Christians went to China, and they translated portions of the Bible, and they made Christian literature in the Chinese language and in other languages used in the Silk Road. So, among these documents, this is Manichaean. They found Christian literature belonging to the so-called Nestorian Church, the Assyrian Church of the East, and also Manichaean literature, which included sections of the Book of Enoch entitled the Book of Giants. So there's 7 books in the Book of Enoch. This is Ethiopic Enoch, or First Enoch. And I'll read the titles of these books. And then we'll conclude this session. The book of Enoch is composed of 7 books. First is the book of Watchers, which is 1 Enoch chapter 1 through 36. And then you have the book of Giants, which is preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the Turfan Scrolls from China. Then you have the book of the Similitudes of Enoch, and this is also called the Parables of Enoch. This is Enoch chapter 37 to 71. This section includes the Son of Man prophecies. And these prophecies sound like, Jesus, the Son of Man, right? But as a cosmic Messiah. Very similar to the prophecies we find in Daniel chapter 7. Right? Daniel says, I saw one like the Son of Man descending from the heavens, and to him was given dominion and power and glory. And that's chapter 7. That's a lot of scholars see that as what Jesus is referring to when he calls himself the Son of Man. It's a messianic figure, pre-existent cosmic Messiah who's going to be revealed in the earth. So these prophecies of the book of these prophecies of the Son of Man are found in the Similitudes of Enoch, also called the Parables of Enoch, but those were not found represented among the Dead Sea Scrolls, unless these manuscripts are hidden away, contain, which is possible. Be that as it may, I'm going to talk about this later on. Scholars, Enoch scholars, believe that the Son of Man prophecies from the book of Similitudes of Enoch are not a Christian interpollution. Pollution. They're not a section that Christians inserted. It's not like some Christians wrote this prophecies of Jesus, inserted them into the book of Enoch. They believe the Son of Man prophecies are actually pre-Christian. Maybe reflective of what Christians taught and believed about Jesus as the Son of Man. But most scholars looking at the book of the Similitudes of Enoch, even though it's not represented yet in the discoveries of one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they believe that this is a pre-Christian writing from the book of Enoch. This isn't something that was later written by Christians and inserted into the book of Enoch, but it represents pre-Christian writings. And then we have the book of the Heavenly Luminaries, which is called the Astronomical Book. It's basically dealing with the calendar. And then we have the book of Dream Visions, which is prophecies. It's telling the story of the Old Testament in a prophetical way. So Enoch is seeing the events, recording the Old Testament is happening in the future, his future, or the future for him. And then we have the Epistle of Enoch, and part of the Epistle of Enoch they think belongs to another book. So the book of Dream Visions is the book of Heavenly Luminaries is 1 Enoch chapter 72 to 82. The book of Dream Visions is 1 Enoch 83 through 90, also called the Book of Dreams. And then you have the Epistle of Enoch, which is 1 Enoch 91 through 108. But scholars look at 1 Enoch chapter 106 and 107 as belonging to the book of Noah. So the 7 books of the book of Enoch, 1 Enoch, or Ethiopic Enoch, is the book of the Watchers. The book of Giants is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls version, the Turfan version, if you will, but not in the Ethiopic. But still, it's part of the original book. So you have the book of Watchers, the book of Giants, the book of the Similitudes of Enoch, the book of the Heavenly Luminaries, the book of Dream Visions, the Epistle of Enoch, and then the book of Noah. So this is very important, as I mentioned, this is a very important work of literature. And next, as I continue the lesson, we're going to look at 2nd and 3rd Enoch, and then we're going to look at Enochian Judaism. It seems that the book of Enoch, 1st Enoch, represents a form of Judaism that no longer exists, a distinct form of Judaism that wasn't centered around the Torah of Moses. Throughout the Old Testament, I mentioned this in the notes here, there were times when the book of Moses was, the books of Moses, the Torah was lost. So that being the case, how are you going to have a Torah-centric Judaism? And a lot of the books of the Bible, they don't even mention Moses at all, or the Torah explicitly. Now, I'm not minimizing the importance of the Torah. I'm just saying is you had this sect of Judaism that was centered around Enoch, not Moses, like Judaism is today. But I'm saying that's not surprising, because a lot of the Old Testament, they lost the Torah until King Josiah found it. So how could they have a Torah-centric Judaism and the Torah was lost.
That's right.
And prophets still prophesied and ministered even when the Torah had been misplaced. Like I said, I'm not minimizing the importance of the Torah. Of course, it's very important. I'm just saying that there's sects of Judaism in ancient times that the Torah wasn't the heart of their religion as it is for Judaism today as we know it. So, join us for the next program as we continue to examine the book of Enoch from my book,
Right.
The Lost Scrolls of Enoch. So let's conclude in a word of prayer. Do you need prayer, Chris?
Yeah.
What about you, Greg? You need prayer?
I need prayer that I get a ride to the bank and get served.
This cat, Bingo, needs prayer. You need prayer. He needs deliverance. Coming to the church, making a ruckus. What's wrong with you, buddy? He's a sweetheart, though. You got the devil in you. Is that why you're misbehaving? It's like a child. All right, let's bow our heads and pray. Abba, Father, we thank you for the blessings that you've given to us. And thank you for those who are here tonight, those who came to the morning service. I pray that you bless Chris and give him peace of mind and take care of his family and give him better health. Pray for Gregory, too, that you'd help him and his issues he faces, and also help him deal with his financial issues, that you provide his every need according to your riches and glory in Christ Jesus. Pray for those who are fellowshipping with us and those who are out for now for various problems and concerns that they're facing in their lives. I pray they feel your presence and that you show them your guidance, they follow in your steps and follow the right way and be blessed. Bless us all and bless our nation in these perilous times. Pray for the whole world. There's so much suffering around the world, and just pray for peace and goodness and blessings on all mankind. We pray this in the name of Yeshua, our Savior. Amen.
Right.
So,
Well, it's like-
Bingo, are you gonna? Why don't you wave bye bye to everybody? Say bye bye. Bye bye.